Wolfpack episode, whatever. Wolfpack podcast, excuse me, I didn't mean to say episode.
We're back.
Muscle and Fields, we're back from the previous week, so we're not back.
We never left.
We have to stop saying we're back. When we did our first rap album with my good childhood friend Sol, it was our first ever rap album when I was 14, and we had a song where it was called We're Back. And looking back now, I'm like, what were we back from? That was our first album. So yeah,
You're
gotta
not
stop
back.
saying we're back. Huh?
You're not back. You're pack.
Got him. Got him. And we're here today to talk about something that everybody comes across, even if you're not a hardcore lifter, if you've even thought about exercising, lifting, running, swimming, whatever, you've heard and seen a bunch of recovery methods, techniques, modalities, tools that are supposedly there to help you accelerate your recovery, reduce soreness, make you want to train harder, allow you to train harder, and are sometimes marketed as absolute, must use tools, from things like sprays, CBD sprays. This is a new thing. To foam rollers, to massage guns. That's a big one lately. To ice baths. That's one we see a lot. To saunas. To a lot of stuff. Anyways, we're gonna talk about recovery tools, techniques, and mumbo jumbos.
Other buzzwords. I think we should restrict our scope a little bit here.
Yes.
Otherwise, we will lose our shit very quickly.
That's true.
I think we should not touch on supplements today. Because supplements, there's a variety of supplements.
It wasn't a supplement. The spray. The spray is an actual spray that you spray on your joints. Yeah.
As far as I'm concerned, the only supplement I'm concerned with is creatine, because you've been taking it, haven't you?
Yeah, I actually read that paper that supposedly showed baldness.
Makes you bald.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, literally just gave, I think, rugby players creatine.
Yeah, it was rugby players, and it showed an increase in
dihydrotestosterone, aka DHT.
DHT, but a plethora of things can increase DHT anyways, and it was just that one study that showed an increase there, but people took that and ran with the claim of
My question
creatine
is,
makes you bald.
have you stopped creatine since?
No, but my dad is bald as well. And I actually would love to be fully bald rather than the fake bald, because I got to maintain this, whereas if I was just boop.
I feel like no one's truly fully bald, though. You still have some random,
Yeah, on the side. Or I think there are
you
people
have
with
the Mike Israel thing going on a little bit.
with alopecia. I think those people are fully bald.
Anyways,
Anywho's,
bit of a sidetracking situation.
the spray specifically was from, I think, Conor McGregor was promoting a CBD like cryo spray or some BS, where you spray it on your elbow and it reduces inflammation and stuff. The word inflammation is a big recovery method buzzword. Okay, let's define the scope of this episode. We're going to talk about massage, cold water immersion,
Exposure, I guess.
foam rolling. Sorry, did I mention foam rolling first?
Yep.
Compression, massage.
Heat exposure,
Yeah.
and other things, I'm sure.
Other things that will
Active
come
recovery, how we discussed, how we said that?
Active recovery, we haven't said it, but we can briefly mention that as well.
Indeed.
Obviously, we're not going to do a deep dive in the literature for everything, but just give you a general overview of what the literature says and what we say.
This episode is sponsored by Monster, recovery drink of choice.
Recovery drink of choice with the following recovery agents: L-carnitine, taurine, and zero sugar.
Indeed. Take that.
Take that.
Big carb.
Big carb, yeah.
All right, where shall we start?
Let's start with massage.
Sure. That's what we've been up to between these two podcast episodes that we're recording.
Yes, copious amounts of money.
Copious amounts of consensual
Sport
compassion.
massage. So yeah, sport massage is one of those big, not placebos, but big sort of recovery techniques in our world and in the sporting world in general.
Mm-hmm.
So no matter who you ask, sport massage will be mentioned as either something that fixes a problem, or something that prevents injuries, or something that they use regular. It will depend on the person, but sometimes, a few times per month to accelerate recovery.
Yeah, I think the biggest placebo massage comes from how people think it works, for the most part. So people will attribute all sorts of weird mechanisms to it, like, oh, it breaks down your knots in the muscle, or breaks down the fascia, or stuff like that. When in reality, it does none of those things.
It doesn't. And to break down fascia, you'd need
A lot of force.
a lot of force.
Yeah.
And
That wouldn't be a good thing, probably.
the thing with massage therapists,
There you go.
with professionals that do massage, is that we know a few that are, relatively evidence-based, and they recognize that, hey,
Do we?
yeah, I know one.
There has to be some
Yeah.
somewhere.
So where, that individual will do the massage, knows that it's not, he's not curing or he's not diagnosing a bunch of different injuries, but a lot of those professionals will get the client to buy in by appealing to their need and want of knowing that the body's a very simple organism. So they will touch you and they will say, hey, oh, I can feel that your forearm muscle is pulling on your whatever, your elbow, and that's why you have this pain. Or I can feel that your lower back is tight, even though you've told me that your lower back hurts, and that's why your lower back hurts. I'm going to apply pressure to it. It feels good when they do it, or it feels a bit painful. There's a change in pain perception. There's a placebo effect, and then you feel like, oh, they've cured whatever injury that you've had.
I'm going to draw two comparisons here.
Okay.
The first one is some massage professionals are a bit like people into astrology,
Yeah.
where
Nice.
it's, hey, here's this very vague thing. Oh, are your hamstrings tight? Which is like this whole meme, for example, like, oh, I have tight hamstrings, so I can't squat to depth, or I get injured, or have lower back pain. Oh, I can tell you have tight hamstrings. And then you're like, oh, that's crazy. I feel some lower back pain nowadays. So either it sometimes nocivos you into feeling pain or thinking you have pain, or it explains away all the pain you've been having and attributes it to this one very easy fixable solution that this massage therapist
Yep.
somehow has access to. So it's kind of like giving you this very vague prediction. And be like, yep, I told you. I knew,
Yeah.
That's comparison number one. And comparison number two, why I think a lot of massage therapists have this thing, is the same issue as personal trainers. There is a very low barrier to entry into being a personal trainer or being a massage therapist. In fact, I can't really think of too many, if any, people I know that have been massage therapists for a long time. Like, usually it's, oh, you do some massage therapy as part of your undergrad in sports science, or you do it like as part of your S&C stuff, and then you kind of stop. And oftentimes the people doing massage therapy, without wanting to be disrespectful, and this may in fact track with the astrology analogy, is they're not the most educated,
Oh boy.
you know?
You got to throw some disclaimers here. The statements made by Milo Wolf on this podcast are not representative of pack.com or any
Monster.
other.
Monster energy.
Don't blame me. Yes, I will have to somewhat agree, but I will also have to. I wanted to
Contact my lawyers.
I want to say that with massage specifically, it is very difficult to, because there's so many co-founders, placebo,
We're
pain
co-founders,
perception.
co-founders of several companies.
That's facts.
Indeed.
It's very difficult to know, to quantify whether what you're doing has an effect, what effect it has. Sure, you could take a bunch of measurements. We're going to talk about some studies that did try to see whether specific recovery techniques affected certain markers, but with sport massage specifically, and the so many different techniques. Pressure, like, it's difficult to quantify pressure. Sure, there are some scales that are different, but even in the literature, different studies use different scales to quantify how much pressure was used, different techniques, durations. Even the strength of the professional themselves could play a role. So things are very, very vague. But that said, what does the current literature have to say about massage and soreness, perceived recovery, and just is it something that is worth spending your money on?
Sure. So I think this brings up an important point about some of the recovery modality literature, and it's that it rarely really looks at things we care about. And by things we care about directly, I mean, oh, how's your performance after you got this recovery modality applied to you? Oftentimes it looks at indirect markers of fatigue.
Yeah.
For example, in the case of muscle damage, they may look at creatine kinase concentrations. Creatine kinase there's essentially higher concentrations after you train because you increase muscle protein breakdown. Creatine kinase, the enzyme gets released, and so gradually as you recover, creatine kinase returns back to baseline. And so creatine kinase is roughly correlated with muscle damage, right? Same goes for other markers like interleukin 6 or IL-6 or C-reactive protein or a variety of things. But oftentimes, those are measured instead of sport performance. And so you can't draw super firm conclusions from the data that exists. That said, the data we do have on massage does suggest that there is a benefit to recovery. Now, again, a lot of those studies are on indirect markers, so TNCs apply. But as far as the recovery modalities go, it may be one of the more evidence-based ones, quote unquote, but not for the reasons I think that people often assume, which is like, oh, myofascial release, or my hamstring is a lot more flexible, what have you. I'm not even sure there's something to massage making you more mobile, you know? I haven't actually seen any evidence on that, but people often say, oh, my hamstrings were tight and I saw the massage therapist and now I'm looser.
Any range of motion benefits may be mostly due to alterations in pain perception, and they may be acute. So, for example, for foam rolling, and we'll get to that later, like the evidence shows that obviously we have evidence on acute improvements in range of motion, but in order to see an actual increase in range of motion, you'd need to foam roll consistently for over 4 weeks. But back to the massage and the word recovery specifically, I think that recovery is such an umbrella term, and especially in our niche, well, actually in all sporting populations, recovery is often tied in with adaptation. So some of those studies will measure recovery in the form of, hey, are you less sore the next day? And are certain markers down, like CK and so on and so forth? But at the same time, they haven't really assessed whether that massage helped with muscle growth or your sport performance increasing, which is the recovery people are looking for. So they're making the connection that if I'm less sore, then I'm getting stronger, or I'm getting bigger, or I'm getting faster.
Let me push back on you a little bit. I think for us, that's absolutely true. So in our context,
I know what you'll say.
Baked-in assumption is more recovery, we can do more training in the gym, recover from more, adapt to more, see more hypertrophy, see more strength gains, and so forth. However, in a lot of contexts that aren't lifting related, it's mostly about recovery between, for example,
sessions,
matches.
Our matches, yeah, sure.
Where some teams have a match on Monday and Wednesday, and they need to recover as best they can between those two somehow. And so adaptation is not quite so much the focus anymore.
That's true.
But for our purposes, if there's a trade-off between how effective a session is because you used a recovery modality and how well you recover from it, usually that's not a trade-off we want, right? Like if you recover better, but you don't see the same muscle growth and strength gains because you for example, iced your muscles or what have you, then that's usually not a trade-off we want, because muscle growth is ultimately what we're after, and recovery is only a sort of stepping stone to getting that.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And you could use it in our niche, I guess, with like strongman athletes. Or
correct. Yeah.
Like if you're doing multiple events.
Or powerlifting meets even. Let's say, for example, you didn't plan your taper out properly, and you don't really care whether your last session of 3 singles on bench is going to grow you any muscle. You can maybe ice or use some sort of recovery modality that, sure, may impede muscle growth or adaptation.
Yeah.
But in exchange, the recovery benefit you get is way outweighs the chronic loss in adaptation, what have you.
Yeah, that's true. So overall, the literature shows a potential benefit for massage.
Correct. Yeah.
For some markers of recovery. Now, I'm not sure if we can quantify the amount of massage that you need to get in order to see those benefits versus just overdoing it. At the same time, sport massage specifically, depending on the country that you're in, it can be from relatively expensive, or
me and the bros do it for free.
Exactly, to actually quite expensive. But there are also a bunch of massage guns that have emerged and are taking the market by storm. And those tap into that BS market quite a bit, because there's a difference between going for a sport massage session after, let's say, grueling workout and getting that massage session to then not feel as thrashed the next day versus randomly massage gunning yourself before a session, during, mid-set, between sets. So for those applications, I'm not sure we have a lot of evidence.
Yeah, so I wanted to briefly speak on, and I think this ties into massage guns and foam rolling as well, is what the mechanisms or potential mechanisms are behind massage. I'm not super familiar with the evidence, but to my understanding, it comes down to a few things, one of which is just being able to relax, right?
Yeah.
So when you're being massaged, oftentimes you're not able to go on your phone and get stressed out about work or get stressed out about this or that. And so just being in that environment without your phone, without access to potentially stressful distractions or cognitively intense things, that may help recovery on its own. And then also the sort of socializing, like when you see a massage therapist, you're also socializing, and generally having a better social support network is beneficial as far as sport outcomes go. So there's a variety of mechanisms or potential mechanisms. None of them involve like fascial release. And so I think I would be cautious of saying, hey, this is why massage works, rather than saying, oh, this is why massage might work. All I know is there's likely a positive effect.
Yeah.
Um,
A lot of it comes down to you relaxing. And Christian Rwandan, who wrote the book Good to Go, a lot and essentially looked at recovery modalities, specifically mentioned as well, and shout out to her, that the act of relaxation itself
it's huge.
is huge. And again, the placebo effect of sport massage, because most people, I'd argue like 99% of people that go and get a sport massage are not, myself and Milo, the weirdos, going there and trying to be super critical about it. And I've even stopped doing that a bit. I lean into the placebo.
Yeah.
And I'll go have the sport massage occasionally, but I occasionally mean every like few months. Do I go there hoping that it will solve all my problems? No, but for the 1 hour that I'm there, I'm enjoying it and I'm relaxing.
I feel you. One anecdote, I only had a massage once, and I was kind of already aware of the evidence, like I was a second year in sports science, and I got it done and I was like, that was just painful and not fun at all. Like I hated it, and I think I maybe noceboed myself, but at the same time, there is something to be said for people who have that placebo in place, and you got to keep in mind, yes, there is a financial cost to it. For some people, it's negligible. For some people, it isn't.
Hopefully for the listeners of this podcast, it's less than negligible.
If you haven't been tipping your landlord, stop listening right now. Get the money counting machine you have on your desk, count it up,
and then double it by tomorrow.
But yeah, so it's not to be discounted that there's a placebo effect, and that can be an effect in its own right. And also, as opposed to other recovery modalities, like some we'll discuss in the near future, stay tuned, it doesn't have a trade-off with adaptation, to our knowledge, right? Like it doesn't negatively impact muscle growth in return for enhancing your recovery.
Yeah, unless we're talking about extreme frequencies and those joke.
Me and the bros.
I'm trying to agree, but then I'm thinking of some sport masseuses that take it to the point where you're sore, like extremely sore after the massage.
Yeah.
So
that was the one I had. It was a sports massage. So
yeah, you have to be somewhat cautious with how intense the massage is. So if you leave the massage room feeling absolutely battered,
that's not a good thing.
That
you should
may
feel
be
relatively relaxed going out of it. That's a good rule of thumb.
Sure, it may hurt your glutes if they're especially sore, or
that's what me and the bros say too.
It may hurt your hamstrings and calves and stuff and points that are tight, but at the same time, it shouldn't feel like a workout. So that's the problem. Like we're trying to give like a generalized takeaway, which I think we can, but at the same time,
we've done a pretty good job, I think.
Yeah, just be careful with the intensity, and don't be the guy that gets massaged 6 times a week.
Yeah, agreed.
I think a couple of times a month makes sense.
Yeah, so I think now that we've established mechanisms behind massaging, I think that provides us with a nice segue into massage guns, for example.
Yeah, sure. I'm not aware of the literature fully. I have briefly looked at stuff as part of supervising a few undergraduate students in the last couple of years, in the sense that this may be interesting for you to look into, because I was teaching research methods for sports therapy students. So I was like, hey, maybe massage guns is something you want to look into, because they are quite new and there wasn't much literature. I had assumed the mechanisms are similar to massage, but because when you go for a sport massage, there is a sort of systematic approach to how that massage is carried.
Yeah.
So the guy doing it, I assume, if he's a solid professional, will follow certain steps in his head and spend equal time on each muscle group. I assume that you'd need to do the same with a massage gun. But massage guns, again, have been promoted as this sort of tool that you randomly whip out and you quickly massage gun your quad before squats for whatever reason. I don't think that it would make much sense, that makes much sense. And from a recovery standpoint, again, I don't think they would destroy your gains, but being there, absolutely blastering your quads or your triceps or your biceps every day for hours and hours on with a massage gun, probably going to take away from your gains.
I think in light of the mechanisms we discussed for massagers, massage guns just don't make a ton of sense.
Mm-hmm.
So again, I'm not aware of any evidence that suggests they impair adaptations. But at the same time, they have sort of the cons of massagers, namely being relatively expensive. So like getting a decent one. Sure, it's a one-time expense, but it's relatively expensive. A lot of people don't have that kind of money to throw around. Although if you're listening, buy at least 10 right now to prove us your allegiance to the
Buy
podcast.
them and throw them.
Indeed. So yeah, I think a lot of the mechanisms that we hypothesized for massages don't apply to massage guns, but the drawbacks of massage does apply. And even, for example, like relaxation, where you put your phone away when you're getting a massage, you're cognitively quite easy, I guess. With a massage gun, you're holding that bitch in one hand. Obviously, you can still go on your phone and do emails, etc. So even that benefit isn't there anymore. And so I'm quite skeptical of the utility. Again, I haven't directly looked at the evidence, but my hunch is that it's probably not as effective as massages would be.
The evidence-based podcast where we don't look at the evidence and we tell you what we think the evidence says.
Hey, pal, enjoy.
The one utility would be if you have a partner and they want a massage, having a massage gun to do that is much, much easier than actually doing the massage yourself, because massaging people is super boring. Is it not? If for them it's the same.
The bros disagree, pal.
Eh?
The bros disagree. We'll be in
true.
touch.
Another one that is huge is cold water immersion.
I'll stop you right there.
Huge-ish?
No.
What?
Cold exposure is what we call it.
Cold exposure.
Cold water immersion is one subset of cold exposure.
Okay.
Right?
Cold
So
exposure. I was thinking of
cryotherapy-
the people buying the tubs now and just doing.
Sure. There's a
ice
variety
baths.
of things. There's cryotherapy, which is...
Okay, Wim Hof.
Listen, pal. So for context, I recently attended and presented at BASES, which is the British Association of Sports and Exercise Sciences.
Wow.
They had an annual conference. I attended, presented. One of the presentations I watched was about cold exposure, and that was reasonably interesting. So broadly speaking, there are a few categories of cold exposure, from sort of least cold and longest exposure to most cold and shortest exposure. So when you think about cryotherapy, for example, the temperatures involved are really, really low.
Vape Nation.
Indeed. Vape Nation. For context,
I apologize,
for
bases.
For our listeners, Pac is currently vaping in the studio in an undisclosed location. So,
yeah.
How dare you? Anyways, from longest exposure with most mild temperatures to shortest exposures with lowest temperatures. So when you think about, for example, cryotherapy involves really, really low temperatures, so really cold. And that's why you don't spend much time in the cryotherapy chamber or whatever. Whereas with stuff like something called phase change, which I think is literally just people get into a room that's slightly cold, like 13 degrees or something. And by spending enough time in there, like 3-6 hours, it also exposes them to cold or cold temperatures than you're used to. And so, for example, that approach, the phase change approach, people use, for example, on the bus from one match to the next, what have you. Whereas cryotherapy requires facilities and so forth.
Yeah.
Broadly speaking, there is a trade-off between recovery and adaptation when it comes to cold exposure. So whether you're talking about cryotherapy, cold water immersion, phase change, I think too, although phase change hasn't been studied as cold water immersion or...
Where you change your face, like face off?
Indeed, you got it. Broadly speaking, there's a trade-off between adaptation, or the muscle growth you get from a session, or the strength adaptations you get from a session, and the recovery benefit that the cold exposure provides to you. And so chronically, it's definitely not something I recommend to strength athletes, bodybuilders, etc. I think it's definitely putting your priorities in the wrong order. Because realistically, you you may recover better from a session and be able to do 2 extra sets or an extra rep here in that next session. But if it's cutting your muscle growth and strength by a decent amount, that's not worth it.
Yeah.
So the specifics for cold water immersion, cryotherapy, etc. sort of vary. For cold water immersion, for example, generally the recommended temperature of the water is 10 to 13 degrees Celsius. And that can last usually like half an hour, what have you. I think one thing people don't really realize is with cold showers, you're not really in the shower for long enough to really change your body temperature that much anyways, which is the main mechanism by which it sort of starts to process off. So, I don't know, I think cold showers are a bit of a placebo in some sense. I think there is some evidence for some stuff, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, there is evidence for cold showers, not freezing showers.
Yeah.
But cold showers helping with some recovery markers.
Yeah, although I'm skeptical, again, it's the same. The mechanism behind cold water immersion, cryotherapy, and even cold showers would be the same, although I expect with most people's cold showers, they wouldn't actually be in there for long enough to make a difference to recovery besides placebo, probably.
Yeah, and I would argue also that the more advanced and mumbo-jumbo-y and the equipment used, the higher the perceived recovery benefits.
And also the higher the actual fucking cost, though.
Yeah, that's true. Like cryotherapy,
Ain't cheap.
I don't blame the people that go in there because, first of all, the individuals that work there, same as if you go and get a DEXA scan, they will tell you, hey, this is it. Like, this helps with inflammation, reduces this, reduces that. Citation, you don't need a citation. Get in this super expensive chamber that will also get you to be in, like, minus whatever, how many degrees?
Like 150 or something.
Yeah, something crazy where you're like, whoa, I'm freezing. And there's an instant relief when you get out. And yeah, I don't blame the people that get a huge placebo effect from that because they also pay a bunch of money. Yeah. And they make the assumption that, cool, man, there's no chance this doesn't work. It wouldn't exist if it didn't work.
Yeah, what's interesting is, so the way the presentation on cold exposure was kind of structured is for each individual method, like cold water immersion versus cryotherapy, etc., they kind of broke down the evidence into 4 or a few categories. There was like physiological recovery, psychological recovery, and also like perceptual recovery. Mm-hmm. And perceptual is literally like, oh, how do you feel? And oftentimes, the largest effects were literally just perceptual, where you're like, oh, I feel better, you know?
Yeah, for sure.
And so I think that kind of speaks to, hey, a lot of times placebo is a big part of
huge
recovery stuff.
Huge, especially for individuals that also don't have any direct way of assessing whether those methods were detrimental or beneficial. Because, like, for the average individual, like the businessman who will go and get the cryotherapy, right? Mm-hmm. Who's like into he's not evidence-based, but he's like a step above bro. Mm-hmm. So he's like, yeah, I'm doing whatever, myo reps and shmyo reps, and I'm also getting the cryotherapy here and there. That person is not getting ultrasounds and then cloning himself and seeing whether without the cryotherapy session he'd get better gains. He's still making gains, and as long as in his head he's like, I'm recovering better, he is recovering better.
Absolute loser not cloning himself. If you're listening, make at least 3 clones of yourself per day, get them on the side hustles, and start making some money. So yeah, to recap, cold exposure modalities, I wouldn't generally advise for someone to do them unless they were competing, say, in a few days and the recovery was subpar, or we wanted to optimize recovery, even at the expense of adaptation, and they had the money to throw around. For example, if they got 7 clones working side hustles while they're sleeping.
Yeah, the one thing that some people will claim for like things like ice baths is that they don't care about the recovery benefits, but rather they do them for whatever discipline, and it wakes them up in the morning and whatever. If that's your shtick, whatever.
Bro, start a side hustle instead.
Who wakes up in the morning?
True. Who wakes up?
Who sleeps?
True.
As the great poet Nas said, sleep is the cousin of death.
Anyways, moving on from cold exposure, I think the natural segue would be into heat exposure.
Yeah, you can take that, and I'll cover foam rolling.
Honestly, it's not my area of expertise.
Oh boy, the past came right back to me.
No.
Heat exposure. Next episode. We'll see you later.
I have some. So basically, the way I retain information about topics, honestly, is if it's not directly interesting to me, like directly like relevant, I will basically remember like this is useful or this is not useful and roughly why, right?
Yeah.
For heat exposure, okay. If I hadn't, for example, seen that presentation a few days ago on literally the most up-to-date evidence on cold exposure, I would have had the same understanding for cold exposure as heat exposure, which is, broadly speaking, again, trade-off between adaptations and recovery. Does seem to enhance recovery somewhat. Again, placebo effect as well, present in most recovery modalities. And I
What
think
would the common heat exposure method be?
sauna.
Sauna. Oh,
Sauna
yeah.
is a classic one.
Oh,
Or-
yeah, yes, sure. Yeah, that I can tell you a few things about.
Okay, nice. Well, go for it.
Let's just start quoting the Stronger by Science podcast.
Let's do it. So next episode, we're bringing on Greg Knuckles and Eric Trexler. And by bringing on, I mean
We're
we will
going to
just
direct you.
re-upload the video that they posted 2 years ago, and then we'll start working from there.
No, they did an episode on sauna and potential
Were they
benefits.
in the sauna though?
No,
Because that's what we'll do when we do an actual episode. Because we're not broke.
when I was in Bulgaria a few months ago, even though I never liked the sauna, because I had been there with a friend who is from Russia and Azerbaijan, and there they get real with the temperatures.
Nothing like hitting up the sauna with the bros
Yes,
after a good sports massage.
no, it was great because it was in a really nice hotel where the gym was there, and then you could go walk from the gym to the sauna, and that was really relaxing. I had a lot of fun. It was cool. We had sex. No,
Steamy.
but steaming sex. No, but it was fun. It's uncomfortable. Anyways, there may be some. What? You want to say something?
I was going to say something.
Okay,
I
saved
think
by Milo.
some of the same mechanisms from massage do apply to cold exposure and heat exposure. If you're in a fucking cryotherapy chamber or in the sauna, you're not whipping out your phone and replying to work emails
Exactly.
from client number 17, you know?
And it just felt nice to be in the very warm environment, because then you would go from the sauna and have a shower, and then go to the other sauna and sit a bit, and we would sit for a few minutes. The thing with saunas is, depending on the type of sauna that you do, you have to be careful with building up a tolerance, because like one of them was over 100 degrees Celsius. My friend there was just blasting he was just
coals.
The coals, yeah. And I stayed in there for like a couple of minutes and then went out. But you have to be careful, because some people will literally try to force it, thinking they're getting a ton of benefits, and potentially faint.
You sure it was a sauna, or was it just being in an enclosed room with no windows with the bros that was making it a bit hot and sweaty?
And maybe it was both.
Who knows?
It's 2022. Get with the program. But overall recovery benefits, again, somewhat trivial, somewhat overstated.
I'd say they're probably meaningful, like for example, before a competition, if again the trade-off is worth it to you, and if you have a placebo effect. Like I think one thing we need to draw attention to with this whole discussion is, if an athlete comes to me, doesn't care about money, because if I get an athlete, they better have 6 side hustles minimum.
Yes, we have a salary. So when you apply for coaching on the SBS website, there is a salary
Requirement.
not
You
just
have to upload
requirement.
proof.
You have to connect it with your bank accounts. It does a full background check. Terms of example, I know background check involved. We're just kidding.
Anyways, if they have money to throw around, they're bought into a method, like for example, sports massage or even cold exposure to an extent. The more of a detrimental impact it has on their adaptations, the more likely I am to talk them out of it. But if it has a relatively minimal impact on their recovery in their adaptations, and also they do it relatively infrequently, honestly, oftentimes I'm happy just having them letting them have their placebo,
Same.
because there's more important things to do, and sometimes if it's not detrimental to their adaptations, it can actually be beneficial as a whole.
Yeah, and you don't want to be the coach that says no to everything.
Yeah.
But at the same time, the only time where I'll put my foot down, is if they're trying to target an issue with a recovery modality
That they're self-diagnosing as well.
Yeah. So if they're saying, "Oh, my knee hurts, I'm gonna go and see the physio or get a massage," I'm like, cool. Let's look at training volume, exercise selection. Let's problem solve there first, rather than saying, "Oh, I'm gonna go to the physio and he will fix me," or "I'm gonna get a massage."
Or oftentimes with injuries as well, it's like, let's wait 2 days.
With
See if
sauna,
you still have pain then, or in a week from now, and then let's make adjustments, because pain comes and goes sometimes. and
Yeah.
Pain is not easy to. Future episode coming up soon, I'm sure, once we actually
We need a
look at
guest.
more evidence.
I guess. Imagine setting up a guest here.
The only guests we have are paychecks and PMIDs, pal.
Yeah. PMIDs.
Indeed.
We
We don't fuck with non-PubMed index papers. Nuh-uh.
We do. We have
We
a
do.
couple, actually.
Yes.
Shout out Journal of Trainology and the International Strength and Conditioning. What is it called? The IEA says.
You're just making up things now. Nice journal you made up, bro. All right, Mr. Horseshit.
With sauna as well, in Bulgaria, in that particular sauna, they had other claims about health benefits. So like next to each sauna, because they had different styles of sauna, it said, improves heart health, improves this, improves that, and those claims are widely overstated. Overall, some sauna exposure, some sauna time or heat exposure is not gonna kill you and might have some.
So it's not going to kill your gains?
It's not gonna kill your gains unless you absolutely destroy it. But at the same time, it's not something you should be prioritizing and spending your money on.
Yeah, it is very much, again, with a lot of these methods like heat exposure and cold exposure, it is very much dose dependent. So if you go into a sauna once a year for 10 minutes and then peace out, probably don't need to worry about it. You're fine. But if you're going several times a week for half an hour each with, a decent amount of duration, you do need to consider that dose makes the poison.
Yes, indeed.
Poison to your gains. It's killing your gains. Get out now.
Get the fuck out of the sauna. The other modality that, I mean, before we transition, I said whatever happened to sleep and food.
True. We'll make a full 12 episode series on sleeping, which will be just us snoring on camera.
That's my friend Rico falls in the category of.
Oh, he does, yeah.
He will train multiple times a day, sometimes very hard. He's one of those guys that loves training hard, both endurance and resistance training, boxing as well, which involves him getting punched, and we'll sleep 5 hours a night, interrupted sleep as well. But we'll then be like, cool, gotta go get the sport massage, get this, get that, get the other.
Treat yourself.
Shout
what I
out
say.
to my brother.
Shout out to the bros.
Okay, we'll mention sleep and food at the end as like a,
No, we can actually make full episodes on, hey, how should you sleep to optimize recovery? And
with your eyes closed.
indeed. See you next episode for more great jokes.
Nice. Yeah. So next one would be what? Compression
It's
garments?
compression, active recovery.
Active recovery, I'm curious to see what you have to say. For me, I think active recovery in the form of, moving around, light walking. I'll just say anecdotally, really nice.
Yeah.
And it allows you to also get your steps in, higher step counts associated with all kinds of health benefits, reduction in all
Like being a
costs.
loser and not side hustling.
Not if you're side hustling on your phone, drop shipping stuff on Amazon, come on, or talking with clients.
Investing in rare fish.
Exactly. But associated with a bunch of health benefits, reduction in all-cause mortality, all kinds of diseases. So you're essentially getting, even if the active recovery itself is not fucking huge, the benefits you're getting from light walking are huge.
Sure. I think I agree with you by and large.
Of course,
So we have a meta-analysis on comparing the effects of 10 different popular recovery modalities on a variety of recovery metrics. Like, for example, I mentioned earlier, creatine kinase, marker of muscle damage,
soreness,
IL-6, soreness, and so forth. And there does seem to be overall some evidence in support of active recovery as one of the more effective methods. So massage is reasonably effective, active recovery is reasonably effective, compression can be reasonably effective. With active recovery, I think for a lot of people who are into lifting weights, they will get enough non-exercise activity thermogenesis, which is to say stuff that isn't formal exercise but is still movement, to get those benefits, I would say, like in a lot of cases.
to get the recovery benefits.
Yeah, the recovery benefits of active recovery.
Unless you're one of those freaks that goes from
Gym.
the office, gym,
Yeah.
and then back on the desk.
Exactly. In which case, yeah, you may benefit in terms of recovery from getting some slower-ish or moderate speed walking, and maybe I would say for recovery purposes, maybe like 5,000 to 10,000 steps a day at most. I would say for health, probably more. I would say for recovery, you probably see diminishing returns at some point there.
Yeah, for sure.
So you don't need to do 20,000 steps for optimal recovery. In fact, it might be worse because then your hip flexors get some fatigue. Maybe you might feel a bit off, etc.
Especially if you're not used to walking.
Exactly. Going from nothing to 100.
You hit the nail on the head with, I think, 5 to 10.
Yeah, I think it's solid for...
Solid, yeah. Spot
After
on.
that, you may see like a plateau sort of thing, where
Yeah.
you don't see much of an improvement or detriment, and then maybe after like 15,000, what have you, consistently, it may get a bit worse.
And from 8 to, like, let's say 16.
Yeah.
You're getting most of the health benefits as well.
Yeah, 100%, especially for lifting. So I think the meta-analysis generally showed that the greatest health benefits of walking specifically are between around 12,000 to 15,000. But if you're lifting weights, to some extent, that will contribute towards your activity overall.
Yeah.
And so the optimal number of steps might reduce slightly. I actually spoke about this with Quick Knuckles.
Why don't you marry him?
I will.
I think
pal.
he's married. No, I know he's married. So
Hey, I'm sure he's open to multiple partners. So yeah, I think with active recovery, generally having somewhat of an active lifestyle, but keeping it relatively low intensity is the key. So you don't want to go out and start sprinting and doing HIIT or high intensity interval training for active recovery. No, you want to keep it very easy. Jogging, for example, is often used as active recovery amongst like athletes, and it's a terrible idea because jogging is one of the more fatiguing activities you can do because of the impacts, because of everything involved. It's actually something my lecturers used to rant against during lectures, talking about active recovery. back in
over at
day.
the Endurance University of Loughborough
Indeed, at the
with the
great,
OP
great
gym
university. Indeed,
And
and
you-
Jonathan Folland.
Eh?
And Jonathan Folland.
and the University of Jordan Peters,
And where Stu Phillips used to lecture.
and
Where I used to be, most importantly. Great gym. 2 gyms. And one of the world's best benchers, potentially. This one random junior 93 kilogram lifter who's benched 227 kilograms in the IPF.
Okay, fair enough. Shout out
Very
to him.
strong.
IPF 2022. Still talking about IPF.
Indeed. Get it over with already. Please, Mr. Musk, buy the IPF. Get it all over with.
Yeah,
buy it,
disassemble it.
Indeed.
end.
Disassemble it, throw it away. Get weightlifting back in the Olympics in 2 years when it's out or something. Isn't weightlifting being kicked out of the Olympics?
I think for 1 year or something. Or
Really?
Wrestling as well.
Why does it matter for 1 year? Because there's not even Olympics for you.
I'm not for like one Olympic. I'm not
Cycle.
sure. I'm
Yeah.
not sure.
Anyways, so active recovery, generally a good idea, generally well supported. Obviously, if you take it to the extremes, it might get, worse again, like if you do 20,000 steps plus. And also, generally speaking, spending too much time on a single recovery modality, probably not the best idea
Yeah.
in terms of it cutting into your relaxation time, which is arguably more important, or stuff like that.
But some more than none, because I get like the thing with us is we live in Europe, and in Europe you can walk places. A lot of people in the US and clients included.
Yeah, it's weird.
Yeah, they have to drive everywhere. So cool. You don't need to get your 16,000 steps, but getting 5,000 steps versus 1,000 makes sense.
Yeah, I get you.
For example, even or like one of the friends that is here now, Orfez, who is a developer, even though he lives in Greece, he's averaging like 20K steps a week.
Yep.
So for those people, even 5,000 steps a day
Would be big.
would be big. Yeah.
Cool. I think now we're moving on
To compression garments.
Indeed, which is one of the areas of evidence where I had a couple lectures on in undergrad, and I'm aware of the meta-analysis recently, and to my knowledge, it was roughly like
Like a
Decent.
mild thumbs up.
yeah. The thing with compression garments, and by that I mean like leggings or tight compression tops, what have you. Like typically, Under Armour has a lot of compression garments. That's what I think of when I think compression.
Yeah, always.
The thing with that specific modality is, yes, it has some evidence for it. It doesn't seem to be impacting adaptations in any meaningful way. It seems to work by enhancing blood flow mostly. And generally enhanced blood flow for a variety of reasons is going to enhance recovery. The thing with compression garments is, man, they're just not very practical. Like I don't like wearing them. Most people like wearing them.
They don't?
Yeah, it's not very comfortable
When I was at my fattest, I loved wearing leggings.
because that's the only thing that would fit you.
That's a fair point. But no, I felt it was like being naked in the gym. Maybe I was naked. But no, it felt nice. I mean, don't people enjoy?
I think it's the duration of exposure to compression needs to be pretty high as well. To the point that, one thing I was considering when I was in my freak days was sleeping in compression pajamas. Because, hey, I'm asleep, so I'm not going to feel the thing anyways.
Imagine waking up to that guy. Oh
Indeed.
boy, the pajama guy with the Under Armour.
Indeed, relaxing, chilling.
But the whole everything though, simultaneously sauna, compression garments, massage gun, and cold. Half of your body dipped in ice water, and the other one being in a sauna.
Yeah. So there is some evidence in support of it. If you're willing to invest some money, because it's not super cheap either.
Yep.
Compression garments are usually relatively expensive. If you're willing to look like a widow or wear more layers to hide them from the world, which the good Dr. Pack here wasn't.
It was straight up leggings and a t-shirt.
Yeah.
That was cool.
If it's oversized, it's acceptable in my opinion.
It wasn't.
If not, t-shirt.
The t-shirt was oversized.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
of
you
course.
can't see the crotch at all times because otherwise it's a bit.
Yeah, that is a bit. But yeah, you want to look like a weirdo, especially
Shout
if you're...
out to an old friend of mine. So I was 15, 16. I needed to squat in the gym. I was pretty weak still. I was like squatting 100 or what have you.
1,000 kilos.
Of course, pretty weak. And I went to the gym and I was like, fuck, all the racks are taken. Look over, see this one guy with weightlifting shoes. And I was like, damn, that's kind of nice. Realize he's wearing purple leggings and a Bro Science Life tank top.
Oh, wow.
And it turns out, I spoke to him afterwards because like, oh, can I walk in? He was like, yeah, sure. What are you doing? I was like, oh, front squat.
He was Larry Wheels.
No, he was an alumnus of my school. Shout out to Matthias, who was exactly 10 years older and randomly just went to that gym and...
Oh, wow.
Small world. And then...
Where is he now?
He is
Exactly.
working as a lawyer, I think, or
Yeah,
something.
working.
So, big bank. Shout out to Matthias.
Working for somebody else.
And yeah, we lifted together for a few years, and it was great. But I'll never forget those purple leggings in the gym.
Shout out to Matthias. Don't sue us.
Indeed.
Sue me. So...
Compression.
Yeah, compression. But what else? Yeah, overall, mild thumbs up. Nothing that will change your life.
There's stuff like
foam rolling as well.
Foam rolling and also stuff like electrical stimulation.
Electrical stimulation, I cannot say anything. For foam rolling,
I can say it because I saw meta-analysis and included it, and it was basically, this doesn't do much.
Okay.
And it's probably also one of the more expensive and gimmicky
Isn't there a risk
pieces of shit.
involved as well? I assume. No? Probably
No, I
not,
think
because you're
there's
buying a
no,
machine that
no,
is
no.
regulating the,
No,
you're not
yeah.
sticking
facts.
forks in electrical outputs. Please do not do any of that. We don't
Indeed.
recommend it. But yeah, for foam rolling,
You're the expert, File.
the expert.
Why the expert, by the way? I think you have an announcement to make, potentially.
An announcement to make. Yes, I will be the research reviewer for the research review by Lane Norton called Reps, Research Explained in Practical Summaries, which is targeting a different audience than, for example, the research review by Mass, SBS, and et al., which we are big fans of, and different audience than the research review by James Krieger. So this is more for people that are not...
Losers.
Yes, that are not us. I'm editing everything I want. I'm doing the editing here. But yeah, check it out. Anyways, I reviewed a meta-analysis on foam rolling. But that was for range of motion, but I had to look at some of the recovery stuff as well. Foam rolling can reduce soreness to a certain extent and can obviously acutely increase range of motion and increase range of motion after 4 weeks of continuously being applied. But again, the reductions in soreness are not anything game-changing. So as far as recovery goes, it may be that, you do foam roll because you enjoy the act of pressing against something and massaging your muscle, and it could be sort of like a self-massage again, as we mentioned, but not a game changer and not something that you need to definitely include in your recovery toolkit.
Yeah, and I think it's a relatively time-consuming thing as well.
For sure.
And a lot of people don't find it comfortable.
Yeah, it's the common thing you hear about foam. Nobody says, "Yeah, man, I love foam rolling." And
I did that for I had the whole placebo. I was doing it for 20 minutes per day when I was like 17.
why?
Horrible. Because injury
Masha.
prevention. I had voodoo floss band, bro.
What's a floss band?
It's like a random elastic band that you tie around the joint to make it heal, I guess.
That's the one thing I have never understood is K-tape. I don't get it.
Yeah.
I've
K-tape
always
being athletic tape, yeah.
Yeah, kinesio tape.
Yeah.
Looking at it, I'm like, how is this doing anything? Like, it does, even intuitively. Foam rolling intuitively makes sense if you don't know. You're like,
You know what triggers me a little bit?
up,
When
nice,
they call
pun
it-
intended. Trigger point.
When they call it self-myofascial release.
Yeah, for sure.
It's not... Massage doesn't release your myofascia.
Yeah, but see it from the normie viewpoint. They're like, oh yeah, it hurts a lot. I'm pressing against this thing, and not, oh yeah, look, I can press my quad here, and this specific point hurts, therefore something is happening there. I'm now going to roll over it and fix it. Same with like crossballs.
Yeah, I get you.
Yeah, and if you will have had gone overboard with those techniques, so constantly rolling anything that felt even like, cool, bro, you're training hard. You're walking.
Rolling, what?
You're training hard. You're there, pushing yourself, you're moving, you're doing a bunch of shit. Stuff will hurt. Obviously, if you're in excruciating pain, maybe something is wrong, but you will be sore. You will be stiff. that's the one thing I'm very proud of myself for developing a very, very positive mindset when it comes to any sort of pain in the neck. Like I will randomly get it like a knee pain. Not excruciating knee pain that doesn't allow me to walk, but I might walk and be like, oh, my left knee started hurting a bit. Well, I forget about it.
Freaks. Yeah.
15 minutes later, it's not there anymore.
Yeah. I think the final thing we touch on, and that's very easy to touch on, is non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs.
Yeah, so in extreme dosages, probably not the best idea.
Yeah, I think generally, so the mechanism by which they work is stuff like reducing inflammation, to my knowledge, right? And inflammation, or rather acute inflammation, is involved in the adaptation process.
Yep.
And so by taking them after a session, for example, where you're supposed to have some acute inflammation and reducing that acute inflammation, that can interfere with the adaptation process. And so, again, while they generally can help with recovery, and especially if you like have pain or what have you, they're probably not advisable, especially on a chronic basis.
Exactly.
If you take them every once in a while when you're sick, it might be okay.
Yep.
I would say personally, just because I'm a freak, I still try and make an effort to take paracetamol, for example, instead of ibuprofen, because ibuprofen's an NSAID, whereas paracetamol isn't.
Oh.
So taking alternative painkillers that don't impact inflammation may be helpful, but ultimately, if it's a relatively infrequent use, I wouldn't worry too much about it.
Exactly.
So.
And yeah, the only time I take painkillers or I've taken is during the healing process of a tattoo, and not during the first days, because again, you don't want to mess with the healing process.
Loser.
Yes, exactly. On that note,
it's been real.
It's
been a
emotional.
monster of an episode once again.
Monster of an
It's like
episode.
it's all we do.
Omar Isov, we're coming for you, bro. We love you.
Literally.
Peace from Greece, aka Southampton.
Peace.